A 65-year-old woman who fired her only son and daughter-in-law along with her parents, and covered up her granddaughter's abuse and married another woman's husband, a sex therapist, and died in a foreign country surrounded by strange people who controlled her phone. That woman does not get to simply whisper one sentence to one board member and call it restoration. You have heard Joni's deathbed wish. If Jonathan reaches out for reconciliation, give him that day. Give him Daystar. You might believe she offered him restoration. You might believe she offered him peace. A mother finally seeing her son clearly. A woman at the end choosing grace over pride. I believed it too. But what if I tell you we were wrong? It was a trap. Stay with me. Because what I am about to show you is not speculation. It is a pattern. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Joni Lamb was dying. She knew it. She had weeks, possibly months, of declining health before Doug Weiss took her to Mexico for what would be the final 4 days of her life. She had time. She had access. She had relationships with some of the most powerful voices in American Christianity. And she had something she apparently wanted Jonathan to know. Something about restoration. Something about giving him that day. Something about the ministry his father built and the son she had fired from it. So let me ask you something. If you were a dying mother and you had a final wish for your son, who would you tell? Would you tell your son directly? Joni did not call Jonathan. Not once in her final weeks. Jonathan found out she had died 10 minutes before it went on social media. Would you tell your daughters, the ones who would be planning the funeral, controlling the guest list, deciding who speaks and who does not? Joni did not tell Rachel. Joni did not tell Rebecca. The daughters who organized a funeral that erased Jonathan from every screen knew nothing, apparently, about their mother's supposed dying wish for their brother to come home. Would you tell your husband, the man beside you in your final hours, the man who accompanied you to Mexico, the man who was there when the last breath came? Joni did not tell Doug. Would you tell the ministry partners, the men who had known Marcus, who had preached from Daystar's pulpit for decades, who had the spiritual authority and the public platform to make a dying woman's wish impossible to ignore? Jentazan Franklin was at that funeral. Perry Stone, Marcus's friend, Joni's friend, a man connected to this ministry for as long as anyone can remember, was accessible. Joni did not tell either of them. Would you put it in your will? She had lawyers. She had a will. She had the legal infrastructure to make her intentions permanent, documented, and publicly verifiable. She did not add a clause. She did not record a message. She did not write a letter. She did not make a video. She told one person. One. In private. Verbally. With no witnesses. No documentation. No paper trail. She told Tom Callender, the head board member. Now ask yourself, was Tom Callender the man she chose because he was emotionally connected to Jonathan? Because she knew if he heard this, he would weep? Because she knew he would immediately pick up the phone and call Jonathan and tell him everything? Think about what that required you to believe. Here is the question that changes everything. If this was a genuine dying wish, if Joni Lamb truly wanted her son to come home, why did she tell nobody else? I want to show you what a real directive looks like. Because we have one in this story. Marcus Lamb's succession plan. When Marcus Lamb wanted Jonathan to succeed him, he did not whisper it to one board member. In a private conversation with no witnesses. He told the family. He told the board. He communicated it in a form that survived his death, that Jonathan could later reference publicly, that multiple people could confirm, that existed as a documented intention rather than a private verbal statement from a dying man. That is what a real directive looks like. Multiple witnesses. Documented communication. Structured to survive the death of the person who made it. Now look at what Joni gave Tom Callender. One sentence. In private. To one person. With no other witness in the room. And notice what happened the moment that sentence began to cause problems for the institution. Tom Callender sent a text message 2 days after the funeral. Please correct your statement immediately that you spoke to the head of the board and that I said anything to you about what Joni's last wishes were. I did not share any such statement with you. The only record of Joni's dying wish, the one private verbal statement to the one carefully chosen person, vanished. With a text message. Marcus's succession plan, communicated to multiple people, documented, structured. Persistent, could not be erased with a text message. Joni's dying wish, communicated to one person, verbal, undocumented, unwitnessed. Disappeared the moment it was no longer useful. Ask yourself, did Joni Lamb, a woman who built a global television ministry, who had lawyers and board members and ministry partners, who had daughters who ran communications and sons-in-law who ran operations, did that woman not understand the difference between a directive and a whisper? Or did she understand it perfectly? Let me show you the architecture. Because this did not happen by accident. Step 1. Joni tells Tom Callender, and only Tom Callender, that if Jonathan reaches out, give him that day. She chooses Tom specifically. Tom, who is emotionally connected to Jonathan. Tom, who will weep when he hears it. Tom, who, she calculated, would carry the message to Jonathan in the most emotionally overwhelming way possible. Not from his mother directly. Second hand. Through a weeping board member. Carrying the weight of a dying woman's supposed grace. Step 2. Tom receives the message. Tom weeps. But Tom does not call Jonathan. Jonathan, who spent years being pushed out, fired, erased, was not called. The message that was supposedly meant to reach him did not reach him through the person who held it. It reached him another way. Through the public account of the reconciliation facilitator. Through the record. And what does that do to a man? It opens him. It softens him. It makes him willing. It makes him say publicly, learning that my mother's dying wish was for me to return to leadership at Daystar is both healing and deeply confirming. He is now on record. Publicly. Emotionally invested in the wish being real. Willing to pursue reconciliation. Step 3. The reconciliation conversation opens. Jonathan and Susie come to the table. They are willing. They are ready. They have been softened by a dying mother's supposed grace. And then the condition arrives. Retract the allegations about your daughter. Make admissions you do not believe to be true. Now the architecture is complete. Because the trap has two possible outcomes. And the institution wins either way. If Jonathan accepts the condition, the abuse allegation disappears. Jonathan retracts it publicly. The institution is protected from liability. The questions about who knew what and when in the cover-up questions, the questions about what happened to baby Lamb, those questions are closed. By Jonathan's own hand. The dying wish was the key that unlocked the door to make that happen. If Jonathan refuses the condition, Jonathan is now publicly on record refusing his own mother's dying wish. He says he wants reconciliation, but he will not meet the condition. The institution points to the condition as reasonable and fair. And Jonathan, the man who claimed to honor his mother, the man who wept when he heard her dying words, looks like the obstacle. The man who could have come home. Who chose not to. Either way, the allegation is neutralized or Jonathan is. Either way, the institution wins. Either way, Jonathan loses something. That is not grace. That is architecture. If Joni meant her words, if this was a genuine, heartfelt, I finally see my son moment, the silence of everyone around her becomes impossible to explain. Rachel and Rebecca were undeniably involved in planning that funeral. They controlled the guest list. They approved the program. They decided who spoke and who did not. They curated the slideshow that looped for 25 minutes without a single image of Jonathan. If their mother had told them, I want Jonathan to come home, I want him to have Daystar, I want this family to heal, would Rachel have approved a slideshow that erased her brother from their mother's life? Would Rebecca have given a tribute that never said his name? Would Jentison Franklin have stood at that pulpit and delivered what Julie Roys called one of the worst cases of spiritual abuse she had ever witnessed, a sermon aimed directly at shaming the critics of the woman whose dying wish was supposedly to bring those critics home? The funeral is the evidence. Not the words Tom Callender reported. The funeral. Because if Joni's wish was real, if she told Tom in September and the funeral was in May, there were 7 months in which that wish could have shaped the way her family prepared to say goodbye. 7 months. And not one person else heard about it. Not a single decision made in those 7 months, not the slideshow, not the seating, not the program, not the sermon, reflects a woman whose dying wish was for her son to come home. The funeral reflects the opposite. The funeral reflects a family that had been told something very different. Or had been told nothing at all. Which means one of two things. Either Joni told Tom something she never meant and expected him to single-handedly override it if certain conditions were not met. Or the wish was never meant to actually restore Jonathan. It was meant to relaunch Daystar with the abuse case neutralized. The focus was never Jonathan. The focus was the institution. Jonathan would have been used to close the liability. And then, when his usefulness was exhausted, he would have found himself outside again. Joni Lamb in her final weeks was carrying enormous shame. She knew what she had done. She knew what she had covered up. She knew what Doug Weiss was when Denise Boggs told her wolf in sheep's clothing. And she married him anyway. She knew what she had said to Jonathan, let God judge between us, and within 2 months. She was diagnosed with cancer. The anonymous woman who facilitated the reconciliation attempt said it plainly, Joni killed Joni. Through disobedience. Through compromise. Through choices that opened doors that a woman in her position could not afford to open. And Joni knew that. But here is the thing about shame when it lives alongside power. Shame does not always produce confession. Sometimes shame produces management. A woman with that much to answer for does not get to simply whisper one sentence to one board member and call it restoration. If Joni wanted Jonathan to come home, the cost of that was a phone call. Her voice. His ears. No intermediary. No architecture. Just a mother calling her son and saying the words herself. She did not make that call. And what she left Jonathan instead, what the whisper to Tom Callender actually delivered, was not a path home. It was a door held open just wide enough to see the condition waiting on the other side. Jonathan Lamb refused the condition. He refused to retract the allegations about his daughter. He refused to make admissions he did not believe to be true. He refused to buy peace with a child's testimony. And now, knowing what we know, that refusal looks different than it did before. It is not just integrity. It is discernment. Jonathan saw the architecture. Maybe not fully. Maybe not in the forensic way we have laid it out in this episode. But somewhere in his spirit, somewhere in the years of watching this institution manage narratives, control information, and use language as a weapon, he understood that what was being offered was not what it claimed to be. He stood anyway. Not because he does not love his mother. He does. Not because he does not want to come home. He does. But because coming home through a door that requires him to deny what happened to his daughter is not coming home. It is surrender. The whisper was designed to make him feel the door was open. The condition was designed to make sure he could not walk through it without paying a price. That protected the institution at his daughter's expense. Jonathan said no. And in saying no, in refusing to be delivered by a dying wish that was never what it appeared to be, Jonathan Lamb did something the institution did not anticipate. He made the architecture visible. The whisper is on the record. The condition is on the record. The denial text is on the record. The funeral, every decision of it, is on the record. And the pattern they built to trap him is now the evidence that convicts them. Joni had weeks to call Jonathan. Her voice. His number. No intermediary required. She had lawyers who drew up her will and did not add a clause. She had daughters planning a funeral and did not tell them what she wanted. She had ministry partners with decades of relationship and did not pick up the phone. She had a husband beside her until her final breath and did not say his name to him. She told one person. In secret. Verbally. With no witnesses. No documentation. No paper trail. And that one person sent a denial text 2 days after the burial. Joni Lamb in her final weeks did not give her son a gift. She gave the institution one last tool. And Jonathan Lamb, faithful, honest, protective of his daughter, refused to be the tool. The tower is still standing. The signal is still going out. And Jonathan is still at the door. Not because of a whisper. Because of a calling. Joni had weeks to call her son. She did not. She told one person in secret with no documentation, no witnesses, no clause in the will. And that one person denied it 2 days after the burial. Do you still believe it was a dying wish? Or do you believe, as the evidence suggests, that it was something else entirely? Leave your answer below. Because I believe the people inside that building are reading these comments. And I believe what the church says in this moment matters more than most people realize. Subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. And if this work means something to you, support this channel.